fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, oh fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck.
Colorism is the practice of discrimination by which those with lighter skin are treated more favorably than those with darker skin. This practice is a product of racism. A clear example of racism would involve a business that refuses to hire black people, while an example of colorism would not preclude hiring a black person, but there would be a preference for a black person with a lighter skin tone. From this example, we can see that colorism can occur across all races. The term colorism was first coined in 1982 by Alice Walker. It was defined by her to mean the prejudicial or the preferential treatment of the same race of people solely based on their color. Before colorism was invented, the more usual term was colorphobia or color struck. But what kept black people from naming it so long, and what keeps us from talking about it now? The history of denial is a driving question for many of us. Colorism is not just an American phenomenon, it's global. Skin bleaching cream is sold in majority of people of color countries throughout the world. In the US, our current understanding of colorism stems from the decades directly after slavery, when everyone was theoretically free and a citizen regardless of race. This meant the amount of color in skin, not just skin color, became paramount for whites to maintain social and economic control. Slavery was inherited, and the determination of a slave was dependent on the status of the mother. This system ensured that white male slave owners who had children with the black women they enslaved contributed to their own wealth. Under this system, proximity to whiteness could increase your chances for freedom. The one-drop rule, that even one distant black relative, meant that a person was black or at least most definitely not white, increasingly became a way to define people. In Aristocrats of Color, the Black Elite, created in 1880 to 1920 and released in 2000, author Willard B. Gatewood noted that the darker-skinned reporters pointed out that black churches were often divided by color, and that political positions and government positions were won based on complexion. In contrast, those in the upper class insisted that there was no preference at play, pointing to the existence of working-class and poor light-skinned people as proof that color did not directly correlate to an unfair advantage. The debate mired in frustration, and denial mirrors conversations around colorism and privilege today. Yes, colorism lives on. Today, African American entertainers and actors are far more likely to have light coloring than dark complexions, with the exception of an occasional dark-skinned exotic. But most black models can easily pass the paper bag test, and many have racially ambiguous coloring and features. African American news anchors and reporters rarely have dark complexions. Female entertainers in particular tend to have light skin and hair that is dyed blonde and made longer with extensions. Consider Halle Berry, Beyoncé, Rihanna, and Alicia Keys. Pop singer Fantasia Barrino rose to fame as the 2004 winner on American Idol. She was the object of a barrage of negativity, publicity surrounding her affair with a married man, and the lawsuit his wife filed against her. After this, Fantasia attempted suicide and later told reporters that the media's criticism was based on her dark skin and ethnic features. She said that when she did American Idol, it seemed like everybody was Barbied out. Slim, long hair, light eyes, light skin, and here she comes with dark skin, short hair, full nose, and full lips, and it was harder. But the real question is, where did all of this self-hate come from? Why is there so much preference of skin color? Well, let's go way back to the beginning of it all. You see, the current standards of beauty which reflect and perpetuate colorism can be traced back to Antiquity. You heard it. It goes all the way back to the classical period of ancient Greece. A pale complexion, fine facial features, and light-colored hair became a social construct in this time period. Think about the Aphrodite of Knidos. As you can see, the classical ideal of beauty was entirely Eurocentric. Even the Romans adopted this standard of beauty. I mean, look at the famous statue of Venus de Milo and the depiction of Botticelli's Birth of Venus. These standards even later trickled down to the Italians during the Renaissance. Consider Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa and Tintoretto's Leda and the Swan. These are all examples of art that celebrated the beauty and whiteness in European women. With the advent of the Atlantic slave trade in the 15th century and the colonization of the Americas, Asia, and Africa, black skin became the personification of the undesirable. By the early 19th century, theories of racism were developed and widely accepted. This may also explain why skin bleaching is so common within the countries of Africa and Asia. Angela Harris articulated with conciseness the perceptions of whiteness and Eurocentrism that have informed both art and history. She said, "More white is more European, and more European is more refined. Less European is more primitive, and more primitive is more dark." And with Morton's theory of polygenesis, a lexion emerged that equated blackness with negative traits. Black, dark, and sinister are considered adjectives stemming from the word evil. Throughout the 19th and 20th century, whites expressed what it meant to be black by portraying negative stereotypes of blacks in entertainment and popular culture. In the late 19th century, white performers held minstrel shows where they blackened their faces with cork, drew exaggerated mouths, and wore woolly wigs, also known as blackface. The themes in these performances included jokes highlighting laziness, ignorance, and other negative traits that made fun of the black dialect. This was also the time that characters such as Jim Crow were born. In the early 20th century, negative depictions of African Americans moved to the screen. Furthermore, the negative connotation against blacks became available to children through TV cartoons, with shows such as the 1941 animation titled Scrap Me Mama with a Boogie Beat, which depicted the life of a black river community called Lazy Town. But the crude scenes of laziness and abandonment suddenly change after a riverboat with white women arrives to the town, bringing their so-called energy and good manners to the town. This cartoon strongly highlighted the cultural preferences of whites and displays of many negative stereotypes of blacks described so far and in other popular films. The stereotypical characters such as Toms, Coons, Mulattoes, Mammies, and Bucks were strongly depicted. These racial stereotypes were a staple of films, cartoons, comic books, and novels well into the 1960s. In the 1960s, the Civil Rights Movement altered the legal status of African Americans. The official regime of state-sponsored discrimination was eliminated by civil rights legislation. For a brief period during the Black Power era, blacks embraced their African heritage. A rejection of Eurocentric standards of beauty and the establishment of politics of representation were encouraged. Black women were urged to abandon their hair straighteners and skin lightening creams. The afro became fashionable, and African-inspired clothing communicated the wearer's racial consciousness. This prevailing sentiment was also captured in James Brown's song, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. The Black arts movement introduced a black aesthetic to art, music, and literature. A revolution took place, which allowed black artists to look at their social order from their own perspective. The 1960s were a time of protests, demonstrations, and urban riots, a turning point in the way African Americans perceived themselves. However, the hopes for a permanent transformation were too optimistic, and by the 1970s, the Black Power movement declined. The commercialization of negative stereotypes have re-emerged, and the entertainment industry is exploiting them for profit. Rap music is a multi-billion-dollar industry. In the 1990s, gangster rap glamorized a ghetto subculture. This was reflected in behavior and attitudes that rejected mainstream values and glamorized dangerous and self-destructive behavior. Complexion Obsession is a two-part documentary created by Joy Daly. He provided film interviews of several entertainers. The documentary shows how deeply colorism is embedded into the ethos of hip-hop. Rap's product is an extravagant image of life in inner-city neighborhoods. Tough ghetto youth are shown driving luxury cars and wearing oversized shirts and baggy pants while displaying a menacing visage. The thug image that many rappers project is merely an updated version of the Buck character, a large, threatening, and hypersexualized black male. The old expression, "I don't want nothing but a Cadillac," convey African American males' preference for light-skinned women. This attitude persists in hip-hop culture. According to Patricia Hill Collins, the values of individualism, personal expression, and material well-being have prevailed in the hip-hop culture, while issues of racial failure have been overlooked. And what I personally have to say about this is that representation is everything. These days we have things like social media, Instagram, and celebrity hype. So whatever people are seeing on TV or hearing in song lyrics, some people are making a necessity to live by it. And also, being light skinned doesn't make someone pretty, just like being dark skinned doesn't make someone ugly. I've actually seen equal amounts of unattractiveness in all complexions, ranging from the whitest to the darkest of skin. Our representation on TV alone has really placed a false conception on who we really are. Sadly, we have this biased standard of beauty that has misled many of us, particularly black men, into thinking that this is what beauty is and that dark skin doesn't fit the narrative, but you're wrong. And it's time to unpack your colorism and see the true beauty in every complexion. Because when you tell someone that they're pretty for a dark skinned girl, that goes to show you that you've been brainwashed. Melanin is very beautiful, honey. And after this Tory Lanez thing, I don't even know how to feel anymore because the whole industry is saturated with colorism, and it's truly sad. It's pathetic. And if you're a light skinned person who doesn't speak up against it by referring to all black being beautiful, then you're part of the problem. Because what you're doing is creating this line of separation that shouldn't exist. Okay, and that was Millie with the Spilly. Please like and subscribe for more unpopular content. And don't forget to leave your unpopular opinion in the comment section below. See you next time. Bye.